I approached a girl I had not seen in several years and asked her when she was due. Men, never, ever, 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 don't ever, ever do that. Because she responded 9 months ago. And I didn't hang out very long after that. Actually, I think I went straight home. But the reason I exposed that frailty of my own doing is I decided to make a particular type of mistake that night. We all make mistakes. Whether we know it or not, before we make any decision, subconsciously we're weighing, hopefully better than I did that night, the consequences of a mistake that you might make as a result of that decision. Traditionally, we've referred to those two mistakes. Scientists are incredibly original and they give things beautiful names. Type 1 and Type 2 mistakes. I didn't come up with that. But a Type 1 mistake is to assume something is when it is not. And a Type 2 mistake is to assume something isn't when it is. As you can probably surmise at this point, sometimes one mistake is more appropriate than another. That night, I made a Type 1 mistake. I assumed something was when it was not. The penalty was dramatic, immediate, salient, and to this day, 30 years later, no, 40, almost 40 years later, I'm telling a group of people about what happened to me that night. Not to mention what happened to the poor girl. And so what I could have, had I taken a little bit more time and contemplated the potential results of my mistake, would be to have made a Type 2 mistake, which would have been to assume something wasn't when it was, right? If I had not said anything to her about being due or potentially being pregnant, I doubt that the fallout from that mistake, having neglected to notice that she was pregnant, in fact, if she was, then that probably would not have paid the negative dividends that assuming she was when she wasn't did, okay? So sometimes you want to make a particular kind of mistake over another. Now, what we're talking about tonight is what I call emergent economy. More on that later. But before that, I want to talk about the difference between malfeasance versus misfeasance. Same word, different. What do we call the first part of the word? Prefix.
Prefix, yeah.
Prefix. Mal implies bad intent, malevolent. Starts with mal, right? When we talk about someone's malevolence, we talk about deliberate harm being done to others. So malfeasance implies that there is something being done with bad intent. Mis, however, is the root of mistake, for example. Mistakes are accidents. When you're 11, you say, I did it on accident. Well, that's a mistake. Therefore, misfeasance can often be written off to stupidity or ignorance or having looked the wrong way at the wrong time or some innocent misstep. There you go, there's miss, that resulted in some negative event from that particular mistake. Napoleon said, never attribute to evil that which can be more easily explained through stupidity. I know, it actually is funny to think about because your mind immediately starts to think about all the times and all the examples in the past and in our present world where you may have misread something, okay? And most of the time when you see a feasance that has a negative consequence, it's a misfeasance. Well, I've been riding the fence as I've watched world events unfold over the past 4 or 5 years. And then we pulled out of Afghanistan. And that was a pivotal point for me. And I went to school and taught my students that day, and the first thing I had to explain to them was, eventually you approach a mountain labeled stupid that is so impossibly high, with so much mass, that there's literally not that much stupid in the universe. It has to be explained through some other means. Like, nothing is that stupid. What we did in Afghanistan, you can't account for through stupidity. Well, we've been doing similar stupid things in our economy over the past 2 to 3 years. We could sit here all night and just run down the list of all the stupid things we've done with our economy. The most recent is which that's been presented as an option for the White House to give everybody gas cards to help tackle the rising cost of gasoline. And the reason I say that that's not stupid, it's malfeasance, is because the people that are proposing this know good and well that if they give everybody a gas card, that's going to do what to the demand for gas. And what happens when you increase demand for something? What happens to the price of the thing? Obviously it goes up. I mean, that's before Economics 101. They know this, yet they make these proposals counting on you not knowing that. And that's just one tiny example out of an entire array of illustrations and events that have come down the pike over the past 2 or 3 years, that we can look at the behavior and realize that this is not stupidity. This is malfeasance. This is by design. The collapse of ours and other economies are by design. And the reason I know this is because there's no amount of stupidity to describe any other set of factors that could contribute all at once with the force that they're presenting themselves with to bring us to the place that we are right now. So first understand that you got to choose the kind of mistake you're going to make before you do anything. Second, understand that what we're looking at here is not stupidity. It is pure, I call it what it is, it's pure evil, because it is trying to do damage to human lives en masse. And it is succeeding. So, you have to understand first that everything that I'm going to talk about tonight is through these lenses. It's through the understanding that we're looking at deliberate wrongdoing to affect people negatively. It's hard to get your head around that, because we grow up kind of Pollyannish. We grow up wanting the best out of people. We want to assume that people make choices that are the best for them and the people around them. And I think that if there have been times in the past that has probably been closer to the rule rather than the exception, but we're not in that time right now. The other thing is you cannot underestimate your enemy. And one of the easiest ways to underestimate your enemy is to assume they're stupid. Do not make that mistake, because that's not what we're dealing with right now. Words like economic hurricane in the next few months are being used by people none other than Jamie Dimon of Chase Bank, Janet Yellen, the current Treasury Secretary of the Biden administration. You do not throw these words around like that if you're in these positions. More recently, Elon Musk, June 3rd, said, and this is a quote, "I feel super bad about this economy." The richest man in the world. Ray Dalio, Bridgewater Associates, saw 2007 and 2008 coming almost as soon as Michael Burry did, has written several books. I use his material in my classes all the time, as essentially called what's coming an economic disaster. Speaking of Michael Burry, this morning, you all know who Michael Burry is?
No.
Okay. Michael Burry is the guy that made, was it billions? Or just hundreds of millions?
It doesn't matter.
It was an insane amount of money by buying insurance against boxes of bad mortgages in 2007 and then cashing in on the insurance claims once the loans went bad. And nothing he did was immoral or unethical. It was all above the law. He tried to tell people they would not listen, and he saw it all coming. Michael Burry is a brilliant economic visionary. And he's a money manager, but he looks at the universe through a big, wide lens, not just this tiny little thing that looks that looks at one particular element. Michael Burry is called, this morning said that we are looking at a further more than 50% decline in stocks from where we are right now. So that's, 8 hours old. The dollar is decoupling from the world economy. I don't know how I can emphasize how important and salient that fact is. The dollar has enjoyed what we call hegemonic status. Hegemonic status means that you're de facto the leader of whatever it is that you are a part of. Okay, the dollar has enjoyed hegemonic status as the current reserve currency of the world in terms of what people use when they trade with one another. When we say the reserve currency, we mean that countries that trade with one another, whether it's oil or any other commodity, have always used the dollar to pay for the commodity that they take when they are engaged in any kind of trade. What that does is it creates a demand for the US dollar because people have to keep it in reserve. Does it make sense? That's why we call it the world reserve currency. Because even if you're not in the United States and you're trading with another country for a commodity that you need as for your country, you use the dollar. Well, we are decoupling from the world reserve currency status all over the place. Russia only takes payment in rubles now for their natural gas and their oil. Saudi Arabia decoupled from the US dollar a month and a half ago. China has completely detached itself from the US dollar. Country after country is understanding that what we as the United States have done in our hegemonic status of the world as the world reserve currency is we have, with reckless abandon, solved all of our problems by printing more and 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 more dollars under what they call modern monetary theory, which works until it doesn't. We're at the point at which it doesn't work anymore. How can I tell? Because countries are dumping the US dollar as their reserve currency. What that does then is it removes all the value from that currency. When nobody wants something, that means that it's not valuable anymore. That's where we are right now. So, we are looking at an imminent collapse of the US dollar. This is not a question of if, it is a question of when. Far greater minds than mine have been warning us of this time coming for decades, and it has dramatically increased in its frequency of the warnings in the last two years or so. We've done some really stupid things with the dollar over the last 2 years. None of this is a secret, really. But here's what we're looking at. We're looking at the solution to this most likely being to join other countries in developing what is called a CBDC. Does anybody know what that stands for? I see a couple nods. It is a central bank digital currency. Now, if that sounds a little revelation-y, it's because I personally and our pastor believes that it is revelation-y. Before you begin thinking that this is some horrific pie-in-the-sky daydream that we're coming up with, there are already several countries that have adopted a CBDC or have a deadline for their adoption of a CBDC. The Bahamas switched over to a central bank digital currency in 2020. Nigeria did in 2021. The Eastern Caribbean Union is currently distributing deadlines throughout the countries that make that union. India, late 2022. Russia, 2022. Sweden, it is currently being tested in their economy as we speak. China started working on it in 2022, or 2020, they should be finished in 2022. Jamaica finished their deadline as the end of 2022. What year is this? I keep forgetting. It is 2022. This sounds pretty like right now-ish. Canada is developing their CBDC. U.S. has been given a deadline to report on the validity and the potential workable facets of a CBDC by President Biden in March. He gave a 180-day deadline to a commission that he established to get back with him on what it would take for us to shift over to a central bank digital currency. The UK is researching it, Mexico is researching, and Pakistan has got their deadline 2025. So this is something that's not gonna happen, it's happening. And you can imagine why. Think of the power you have if you can control the quantity of currency for a country with a click of a mouse. But wait, it gets better. Anybody ever heard of a social credit score? Okay. That's not a dystopian nightmare either. It's a real thing that's happening in various parts of the world. China has been working with digital credit, or with social credit scores for quite some time now. They couple that with facial recognition technology, and the fact that everybody carries a cell phone with them everywhere they go. In fact, in some cases by law in China, 2 months ago, China was putting people in prison when they were caught without their phones for extended periods of time. That's a real thing. So, what happens when you combine a social credit score with a digital currency that's programmable? What if they can tell you what you can buy and how much of it you can buy? Great question. They. Who is they? The they is essentially, in our case, it would be the Federal Reserve. Yep. And the complicated political algorithm that tells the Federal Reserve what to do. So the they is, well, in China it's the communist, literally the communist Chinese government. In our case, who is the they?
Global.
Well, now see, you've just jumped us straight into the World Economic Forum that's finished their work a little less than a month ago. And that really is a place we could go, but don't have a lot of time to go right now. The World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab is famous for saying that by 2030 you will have nothing, you own nothing, and you'll like it. You'll be happy not owning anything. That's actually showing up in our economy all over the place. There's services now where you can borrow a car for as long as you want. It's not your car; it just shows up at your front door when you push the app on your phone. We're talking about borrowing appliances and borrowing things like lawnmowers and that sort of thing from a pool of appliances that are available to people. So we're already moving into a reality where ownership is not necessarily considered ideal. Ownership bestows a power upon the owner. It gives you autonomy. It gives you the choice of making it allows you to make choices for yourself. That is not something the World Economic Forum is terribly interested in. We are far more influential from our administration currently is far more influential in the direction of the World Economic Forum than you want to know. But we are incredibly involved in the policy that's being made right now as they meet in Davos. And of course, you probably understood that. And see, the thing is, it wasn't 4 years ago that this was tinfoil hat conspiracy theory stuff. Yeah. Right? We're talking about fast, really fast stuff here. And it's happening so fast that it's very difficult to keep track of. And I've sort of made it my business over the past 2 years to keep track of it. And it's honestly, it's kind of a burden, especially in a household, you know, because you think about this quite often. If you've found yourself with the onus of keeping up with what's going on, and the reality of it is overwhelming because it's not tinfoil hat conspiracy theory stuff anymore. I had a real interesting and fun, simple friend a long time ago who said, look, if you show me enough evidence, it's not a theory anymore. It's just a conspiracy. And let's be honest, they invented the word conspiracy for a reason because it's an actual thing, right? The problem is when we have to separate the theory from the fact. Fact is, we are currently highly instrumental in the development of policy for the World Health Organization and the World Economic Forum. Our White House is contributing to these entities. Okay, so that means that a CBDC is coming. It is coming here and it's coming quickly. Now, let me pause for a moment and explain. I'm not a terribly smart guy. I'm just not. I try to ride on the shoulders of those who are far smarter and more learned and educated than I. But I cannot explain to you intellectually why I know for a fact that Christians involving themselves in central bank digital currencies is your spiritual kiss of death. And I'm going to tell you right now, don't go near a digital currency. Now that means you're going to have a very hard time buying and selling. Does that ring a bell?
Yep.
How do you classify what the difference between, we're on digital currency in a sense now, we have been for decades. And
In a
credit cards are the
sense.
same thing. And they can be shut off, they can be added to, they can be taken away, they can be denied.
Right, but
Okay.
credit cards have scores attached with them to some degree. There are limits to the credit card debt that you can accrue. And digital currency is different because it's programmable. Literally everything else we're going to talk about is based on the presumption that we're talking about working with a new economy. An economy that I am going to say, with all my conviction, a Christian need not participate in. Now, I'm not giving advice. I'm simply telling you what I see. There's a big difference between describing what I see and telling you what to do. I'm not going near it because of the correlation with what it describes and what the Bible tells us is going to happen. So far, the Bible has a pretty good track record if you'll study the Old Testament and find out how it described the arrival of the Savior. It's creepy close. Not so close, it's dead on. And here's another thing I'd like to bring up. If you're sitting there wondering, well, generations have always thought that this was the time. Like, we go back to the parents and the great-grandparents and the great-great-great-great-grandparents, all the way back to the 1200s or whenever. You know, every generation has always thought, this is it. This is the generation. This is because everything looks so bad. Let me submit to you this. There's one wild card that no generation has ever had that we have right now. Ready? The ability to pull this off. Never before have we been able to regulate every single trade in every single economy in every single country in the world. But now we can. It's child's play at this point with the computing power that we have available to us. Technology is the wild card. It is the one enabling us to leverage the basest of human nature. I submit that Cain and Abel, if Cain had had the technology, he'd have wiped out the planet's population right then if he could have. Because humans haven't changed. We're the exact same warm, glass-fogging, carbon-based life forms that we've ever were from the dawn of time. We're no different. We value the same things with the same degree. We like shelter, we like clothing, we like transportation, we like communication, we like affection, we like knowledge. We're no different. The only thing that's changed is our ability to leverage depravity. That is why I and others, like I said, far smarter than I, have determined we are at the cusp of our being allowed to do that which we can. Go ahead. You want to do it? Do it. And we're going, okay. And there's nothing stopping us but us. So, I didn't actually intend on pausing at this point this long. But yes, it is important that you understand that I'm going to proceed from the understanding that don't go near a digital currency. It is programmable. It's already being programmed and used to control human beings in other countries. Do you really believe we're that much better than China? No, we're all depraved human beings. And we will all leverage what power we can to achieve whatever ends we see fit. We're no different. Yes, it can happen here. In fact, we're promised that it will. So, understanding that, understand this also. There's nothing more to economics than trade. That's all economics is. Economics is taking what you have and using it to get something you don't have. It's using something you may not have time to produce for yourself in favor of something that someone else has used their time in order to achieve. It's some effort that you may not be willing to put forth, but others may be willing to put forth. You have something that you can trade for other people's efforts. There's innovation. Other people may be able to innovate in ways that you cannot. You take what you have and you trade it for other people's innovation. Other people may have capital, physical stuff that you may not have but you may want or need. You take the physical stuff, your capital, you trade up for something you may want or need that other people have. The beautiful thing about a free market is when two people engage in trade, they're always trading up and they're both coming out ahead every single time. You know how I know it's every single time? Because if both people weren't coming out ahead, they wouldn't have made the trade. It's nature. That's what makes economics beautiful. It's really that simple. So here's what we have to look at. We use currency to lubricate trade. That's all currency does. It doesn't establish value. Don't make the mistake of thinking that currency makes something more valuable than it was before. Prices may go up, but that has nothing to do with the value of the thing that's being traded. As I said, since time began, we have valued things the same. Shelter, warmth, affection, companionship, communication, transportation, entertainment. All these things have always been valuable to us. It has nothing to do with the currency. All the currency does is lubricate the transaction between those who have and want something else and those who have something else and want to trade for that which we have. It's a brilliant idea. For example, if I needed a new set of tires for my truck, I could offer the tire guy to teach him about economics for, a couple hours, and maybe that would be worth, I don't know, probably this time the valve stem of one tire. But if we could place a tradable value on, I don't know, say 10 economics lessons, and then I'd have to go out and find a tire guy who really wanted to learn economics real bad. He'd have to want to learn economics as bad as I want tires. That's going to be a tough sell. So what we did was we established this currency idea where we are able to lubricate that trade through the medium of currency. And all prices are essentially what the market has determined based on the amount of currency available in an economy at any one time, how much of that lubricant is going to be required to trade one thing for another. So, if money goes away, you can see that becomes a bit of a challenge. Now, I want to talk about a thing that I've called train versus tunnel. Metallica, years ago, wrote a song that has a verse in it that says, "When you think you see the end of a tunnel, it's a freight train heading your way." Some of you may... Okay, be honest. If you've heard that in the song, raise your hand. Thank you. I so appreciate your candor. Good. Yeah, good song, by the way. Traditionally, we have all looked at our economy and valued our own assets with a tunnel paradigm in mind. That is, that if we find ourselves entering into an economic tunnel with darkness and the devaluing of our assets, the things that we hold, that we've traded currency to have, to own. We may trade currency for stocks, we may trade currency for metals, gold and silver, we may trade currency for land, we may trade currency for any of these things that we buy that have some degree of longevity to them, right? We call that an investment. And we find ourselves in a tunnel of darkness where typically what that means is your investments are being devalued. They're worth less and less and less currency. We're finding out some of us the hard way through the decline in stock values right now, to the tune of tens and hundreds of millions of dollars for some people. Well, the traditional way of thinking has always been what? When the markets go down, when things are devalued, when the monetary value of things decreases, you hold on to it, right?
Hold on to it, maybe buy more.
Maybe buy more if you've got more. If you've got more currency, right? You buy more of these things. Great point. Because it's a tunnel. If you look real hard, you can see a dot, a pinprick of light, and you feel that you're moving sort of towards that light. And if you're patient, and you can go through a period of austerity where you don't have to have all the cool stuff for a while, you eventually emerge, the dot gets bigger and bigger and bigger, the light gets brighter and brighter and brighter, you realize, I see the end of the tunnel, you come out the other side, and guess what you can do then? At that point you can take the assets, trade them back for currency, and have the currency again. and go about buying and selling and trading and living in what we call a normal life. That's traditionally been the model, and it's a smart model. But what if the light is the freight train? What if the light is not the end of the tunnel? What if the light is absolute, complete, and utter annihilation? There's a point to this, I promise. It makes you rethink what to do with currency, doesn't it? Now, let me pause at this moment and make it absolutely clear. All I'm doing is helping you think this through. I am not telling anybody what to do. I'm not going to do that. First of all, I'm not legally licensed to do that. Second of all, this church is not a financial institution. That's not my point here. My point is to get you to think a certain way. Train versus tunnel. If what I and others far smarter than I are saying right now is true, then we are looking at the potential for a train. The light getting bigger and approaching us rather than us approaching it. That means the end of something big. What that is, you can divine for yourself through your own personal spiritual walk and readings and understandings of what the end of the ages looks like. I know, these are big, big words. These are big concepts. These are, again, concepts that we've always thought would never actually come in our lifetime. But it's beginning to be clearer that there's a very strong potential that this is that time. Now, what does that mean? It means we need to rethink the way we spend the currency we have. Now, if we're going to have a point in time approach where we are given a certain time window to exchange our traditional currency for a new digital currency, a programmable digital currency, and we are unwilling to do that, that means strategizing in a very different way. I am going to suggest that you understand a concept called opportunity cost. It's an old economics principle, and the way I describe it to my students is opportunity costs are what you would be doing if you weren't doing what you are doing. Again, what you would be doing if you weren't doing what you are doing. You can only do one thing at a time. The thing you're not doing is the cost of what you are doing. Is it getting a little clearer?
Can you repeat that first part again?
Sure.
What you are.
It's what you would be doing if you weren't doing what you are doing. For example, I tell my students, if you got a test on Thursday and you go see a movie on Wednesday night instead of studying, the opportunity cost of seeing that movie was probably failing the test. Right? You can only do one thing. You can study or you can go to the movie. If, in fact, you stay home for the movie and study for the test, you probably will do well in the test, but the opportunity cost for doing well in the test was what?
Not see the movie.
You didn't get to see the movie. So, you need to be thinking along the train lines with opportunity costs in your mind, because you can only use your resources one time. Now here's a perfect example, it's personal. We've got a sidewalk in the front of our house. Every time it rains, every time the sprinkler system comes on, it floods the little sidewalk and there's a big ugly mud puddle there. I have wanted badly to make a little boardwalk with pressure treated 5/4 board that will allow me to make a bridge, a little bridge over where there's always a puddle. And, you know, life would be better. But now I'm beginning to think of the $150 or $200 that it would cost for the insane amount that lumber costs now. In terms of, well, now, hold on a second. I could build a little pressure treated bridge for $150, or I could buy a lot of food for $150. And I'm beginning to think of every potential expense through the lens of a train. Now, what do I mean by the importance of looking at this as a train? And it comes down to this. Has anyone ever considered why God let you live 1 second after you got saved? Why would he do that?
So that we would be able to tell other people about him.
That's literally the only reason.
What was that again, Mike? I couldn't hear.
Why did God let you live even 1 second after you got saved? He knows what a stinking, awful, horrible place this is. Why didn't he just go, gotcha? Right? got him. No. He turned your life around and let you live. He knows that the place you're going is far better than the place you're at. But he also knows that there's a point to staying here. And that point, the onus, the least thing expected of every human who finds himself having crossed into the realm of being a Christian, is to bring as many other glass fogging, carbon-based life forms with you. That is why what you do now to prolong your own life, regardless of level of comfort, is so important. Because if we are right in our assumption that we're looking at a train and that train is going to annihilate us, we are responsible for staying alive as long as possible. For that one reason. So, what do we do? I will tell you what I'm doing. I am spending my resources on things that I have innate. You're right.
Come on, Prof.
Is it? Is it one?
He's not an English teacher.
I think it's two.
Point.
I'm looking at my note. Raise your hands if it's one. Raise your hands if it's two.
It doesn't matter. Yeah.
It's too really?
It is two. Who said one? I hate being wrong. Ready? Okay. Innate utility. I know that one's right. Utility.
Why?
It's harder when you're right up on the whiteboard than you think.
Yes, it is.
I don't know why, it really is. Anyway,
Think about it actually. When
I try not to think about it, then
it's easier.
it's easier. What do I mean by innate utility? What is innate? Innate means that it's a a part of something that's
No-brainer.
trying to use define a word without using the word in it is sometimes tricky. Innate means that it is a part of the properties of the thing, the intent of the thing that you're discussing. It's all of the things that are used to describe that thing, and then the utility that thing may provide you with. Okay, an example I like to use is a guy invented a pickup truck one time, and another guy came up to him and said, "Hey, you know what you could do? You could put stuff in the back of that and haul it around." And the first guy went, "Oh my gosh, I hadn't even thought about that. What a brilliant, I didn't even know." You're right. I could use this pickup truck to pick up things and carry it from point A to point B. Of course not. He invented the pickup truck with the innate properties of you being able to throw a bunch of stuff in the bed and carry it from point A to point B, right? Okay, well happily, that provides him also with the utility of being able to transport things from point A to point B. So a pickup truck's innate utility is its ability to carry stuff from point A to point B. It's innate in the design of the truck, and the utility you receive from the ownership of that piece of equipment is that you are able to use it for what its innate properties intended. So, some things have innate utility. Traditionally, like we said, we protect our assets often in, let's say, metals. Gold and silver, for example, right? The problem with gold and silver is, except for a few very specialized applications, they do not have a lot of innate utility. Now, are they a good vessel into which you can traditionally store your wealth? In the case of a tunnel, of course it is. In fact, an example I like to use with my students is gold can buy the exact same thing in 2022 as it could in 6000 BC. In ancient Rome, for example, a businessman could buy himself a pair of sandals, a nice belt, a toga, and go out into public and do deals for an ounce of gold. 2022, an ounce of gold will buy a businessman a coat, a suit, a pair of pants, a pair of shoes, and a belt, and you'll be able to go out into the world and conduct business with other people respectively. So, gold has been a very reliable vessel for wealth. But if we're talking about a train scenario, not so much. There's a famous line in the song called "I Wish We'd All Been Ready" by Larry Norman. Anybody remember that song? It said a loaf of bread could buy a bag of gold. There's a reason he wrote that. Because there's no innate utility, very little innate utility in gold or metals or stocks. So, personally speaking, what I have begun to do over the past year, year and a half, is to trade my currency for things that have innate utility. They are what they are. If you look at a house, you see a structure that protects you from weather and temperature extremes and makes your life more comfortable. It is the innate utility of a house. Okay? So that's what I'm encouraging people to begin thinking about when determining whether they're going to adopt the model that what we're looking at is a train, and your responsibility is to stay alive as long as you possibly can. So that changes the way you think about what you have and what that means, what that translates to in terms of what is your responsibility continuing to live as long as possible. So I'd like to take a second and talk about some things regarding innate utility. In fact, I break that up into 3 subcategories. There are consumables. There are productive. And there are tradable. I think an E goes in tradable. Maybe not.
It's okay, Mike.
No, I gotta get it right. Mom,
It's right.
is it right?
Yes.
Okay, that's my mom. So, things with innate utility for our our purposes, for all practical purposes, can be subdivided into those, essentially those 3 categories. Some things that we're talking about when we discuss consumables, obviously food. Here's one nobody ever would have thought.
Right?
How stupid is that? But it's true, isn't it? Raise your hand if you like toilet paper.
Not me.
Medical resources are consumables. I have to touch on this a second because ammunition is a consumable, unfortunately. You wish it weren't, but it is.
Right?
Seeds and fuel. These are just, the only reason I'm giving these examples is so you can sort of get a feel for the differences between what I'm looking at as the 3 categories of innate utility. Productive. Here's one. I like to call it dirt. Okay, now here's an interesting thing about dirt. Exchanging your currency or the resources you have for dirt actually works in the train or the tunnel scenario. Dirt is always valuable. Granted, sometimes it is valued at an inflated value with regard to the currency being used to exchange for the land or the property or the dirt or whatever we're going to call it. But dirt always provides. Always. So, train, good. You've got dirt and you can grow food and hopefully there's water on the dirt and you can get water and you can help feed your household and you can help feed other households. All kinds of utility comes from dirt. Same can be said if it's a tunnel. Coming out the other side of the tunnel, traditionally dirt has held its value very well. So this is sort of an exception in that it is valuable pretty much all the time, no matter what the circumstances or the scenario that you're looking at. Obviously, tools. I am very bad about investing tremendous amounts of my currency in tools. I like tools a lot. Again, we have ammo is also, unfortunately, productive. Well, it can be productive in a positive way too, right?
Food.
Right. In the book, 1 Second After, there's a kid running around town trading skinned squirrels for 10/22 cartridges, which is kind of neat. Okay. And of course, fuel also falls in that category. And then tradable. This is the new currency. Don't forget skills. You could be a gardener. I am not. You could be good at hunting. I am not. If you want to trade, look me up, because I can provide some carpentry skill or mechanical skills. First aid. And you know what? Counseling can be an incredibly valuable, tradable skill. Yeah, and you know what? You can go on. There's so much stuff you can put here, and I like, I like being able to sort of brainstorm with the crowd, because people just keeps going and going and going. Okay, so that all falls under skills. But then, of course, there's and I'm running out of space. I'm gonna come over here. In terms of actual physical assets, believe it or not, coffee.
Yep.
I'm a coffee man myself. I've been buying a lot of coffee. Honestly, I have, and I keep it in a refrigerator. Lots and lots and lots of coffee.
That's under productive, right?
And I think that is actually a more fair assessment of coffee. In fact, I'm gonna go ahead and, there. So now it's under both. Yes, actually, it's true that liquor is an incredible, L-I-Q-U-O, yeah, okay, good. I got that one right. And cigarettes, yep. One of the reasons that I chose coffee was because I did not want to protect these. Just saying. Yes, and again, and again, fuel. If you can do without it, which is a tough trade, but you know, desperate times call for desperate measures sometimes.
Opportunity cost.
And exactly, whatever you trade your fuel for, now you don't have that fuel, but you may have something more. Well, if you traded it up, or you wouldn't have traded. Don't ever forget that. And actually, believe it or not, toiletries are inexpensive now. They typically don't have shelf lives, and are very tradable. So anyway, the point is, with regard to the fact that we have to endure opportunity costs, we have to be thinking about whether we want a little wood walkway to get us over a little puddle, or whether we want to be able to provide for ourselves and potentially others through these things that we call innate utility items. And that is what my household is doing right now. I am putting my money where my mouth is. I believe what I'm telling you so strongly that I'm doing these things now. And again, people far smarter than me are doing it as well. Because, again, as I said earlier, it comes down to my absolute, at a spiritual level, unwillingness to move into a digital currency. Now let's just say we don't move into a digital currency. Let's just say that that's 10 years down the road. A collapse is not. And far greater minds than mine are using words like hurricane to describe what we're talking about coming very, very soon. And we haven't even started talking about the supply chain issues. Because that's probably going to show up before the economic hurricane. Research diesel exhaust fluid. Just look into it. Find out what's happening. The deliberate throttling of an ingredient that's required to run diesel engines in this country right now. Okay, so anyway, that is what I mean by emergent economy. What is that? It means that there will be an economy emerging from what we have now due to the circumstances that are going to present themselves to us whether we like it or not. They will provide you with an out. If BlackRock and Vanguard and State Street own your house and you can't make payments, guess what they'll say? This isn't me speaking. This is in the news. They will say, no problem. You can stay in your house, but we own it. Okay? This is not dystopian pie in the sky, maybe someday. This is right now. This is happening this minute. And don't take my word for it. Start looking. Pay attention. This is happening. Okay? So, without further belaboring this point right here, I want to turn it over to Brian to give you a different sort of facet here to look at what we've been talking about.
I was just thinking of, this idea of the Great Reset and Charles Schwab.
Yeah.
One thing, when you look at that, I know you guys are gonna come up with questions about, what about my 401k, what about all this and that, what about, my retirement, but when we're talking the Great Reset, it's all in the name, isn't it? Everything's gonna be reset. So we're just here to kind of get you to think logically, right? And I just had a few passages, just to kind of remind you, this kind of come up when we were talking about these issues, that God owns everything. Here's a passage from Psalms. It says, "For every animal of the forest is mine, and the cattle on 1,000 hills. I know every bird in the mountains, and the insects of the fields are mine." From Haggai, "The silver is mine, and the gold is mine, declares the Lord." And from Exodus, "All the earth belongs to me." So with that said, I kind of question myself a lot of times, well, how did I end up, up here? How did I end up at Landmark? How did you end up in this audience right now, talking about these things? It seems like the Lord has kind of opened your eyes. You didn't just stumble upon Landmark by happenstance. So God owns everything. He owns you as well. He is a steward of you, and I just ask you, just kind of think logically about things. He's planting the seeds in you. He's trying to wake you up to the fact of what we're kind of seeing here. And as a steward, he wants you to be prepared. So that's what I wanted to say about that. And then on the other side of the things, you're gonna come to this thing. Well, what if I don't have enough food? What if I didn't save up enough toilet paper, whatever? And I just want to reassure you, from Scripture as well. It says, here's a passage from Psalms. It says, "I was young," and this is David speaking. And if you got a chance, I say this is your homework for this evening, is to read Psalms 37. But this is verse 35 from that Psalm. "I was young and now I'm old, yet I have never seen the righteous forsaken, or their children begging for bread." From Matthew, it says, "Look at the birds of the air, they do not sow or reap or store away in barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not much more valuable than they?" One thing, when we come to Christ, I think we start to kind of realize that God does own everything, and we are just asked to be stewards of what God has given us. He's given us our children, He's given us our education, He's given us lots of things other than money, and He has given us money, and He wants us to be a good steward of that too. But there's a lot of things on this list that things are going to be a little different. God still owns it all. He still wants you to be a good steward of what He's given you. So, on that note, we'll take some questions, and
Let me add one more thing really quick that kind of ties in with what you've been saying. And somebody, I don't remember who it was, but there was a question that made me think of this. Raise your hand if you consider Christ sovereign, that He is truly the Messiah who came as prophecies suggested and actually described in great detail. Okay, did any of you miss it? We're all the hands are going down. Okay, here's the thing. Most of the world didn't catch it, did they? And in 2022, most of the world still hasn't caught it. And it happened over 2,000 years ago. The prophecies of the Old Testament came true. And most of the world then and now completely missed it. Does that mean it didn't happen? Of course not. It did happen, just like the Scriptures said it would. My fear for this population now is that the Scriptures that prophesy the end of the age are every bit as convincing and detailed as the Scriptures that prophesied the arrival and grace-saving nature of God showing up as Christ and His ascension back to heaven. It described all that in great detail. What we're talking about now is also described in great detail, and people are going to miss it, just like they missed Christ. This is no less valid. The same Bible is telling us what's going to happen as told us Christ would come. So keep that in mind when you begin wondering, well, is this ever going to happen? Yep, it is. As surely as Christ came, this is going to happen. The question is when, what will it take, what will it look like, and which mistake are you willing to make? That really is what it's all about.